For many years, I've been going on walks through Harlem, looking at buildings, at places where some of the great jazz musicians lived. And so I want to invite you to come on this walk with me. The idea of this Harlem walk came from this battered old book of mine, the new edition of the Encyclopedia of Jazz from 1960. And what was really interesting was that in this book, the musicians actually gave their home addresses, which was really fascinating to me. It's kind of unheard of today. So I was looking through the book and I saw Noble Sissle was living at 935 St. Nicholas Avenue in New York City. And of course, Sissle was part of the great songwriting team, Sissle and Blake. They wrote the musical Shuffle Along, Noble Sissle and Eubie Blake. They wrote some great hits like I'm Just Wild About Harry. And he was really an important figure in early jazz and actually in early African-American show business and Broadway. And Sidney Bechet, one of my great heroes, spent many years throughout the 1930s playing in Sissle's band, and they're very, very interesting documents. So when I went to look for Noble Sissle's address, 935 St. Nicholas Avenue, I discovered something really quite amazing. And I discovered that someone else lived in this building, and there it is. Duke Ellington was a resident of this building, and there was a plaque put here in 1976, a few years after Duke Ellington passed away. And I think one of my pet peeves is there really haven't been enough plaques put up for these great figures of jazz and African-American music. So one of these days I'm going to get on that and start to see if I can get somebody to get those plaques up there. So here we are on the corner of 160th and St. Nicholas, and you can see the grocery store in the background, the laundromat, all of that stuff. And you know, it's kind of just has a sort of almost generic, a little bit industrial neighborhood vibe. But what we're about to see is really insanely amazing. So suddenly, as I'm walking up St. Nicholas Avenue, I look to my right and I see this staircase and I'm curious. So I go up and then I see this. This is unbelievable. This is New York City. Cannot believe it. And check it out over there. Just like you wouldn't suspect. It's a completely different world. As most New Yorkers know, this is the old paving of New York City, the old cobblestones. And there's not much of it left. Here and there, meatpacking district, you come across it from time to time. So this is a real precious relic of old New York City. And as you go along Sylvan Terrace, you start to head towards one of the great historical sites of New York City, the Jumel Mansion, which is right over there, right behind us. This was George Washington's headquarters, Jumel Mansion, and it's just this gorgeous facade and an incredible building. And when I visited here a few times ago, people were saying to me, look across the way, that building is haunted. And it turns out that that building is the next address in this Harlem walk, 555 Edgecombe Avenue. One of those places that for me is hallowed ground with just so many people like Johnny Hodges, Andy Kirk, Don Redman, Paul Robeson, Count Basie, who live in this building here on 160th and Edgecombe Avenue. This is a Harlem nightclub map from 1932. I think it was probably one of those things, that they printed on paper menus in restaurants all over Harlem. But here is Don Redman's band playing at Connie's Inn. Pod and Jerry, that's where Billie Holiday was discovered. Billie Holiday described 133rd Street in her autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues. In those days, 133rd Street was the real swing street, like 52nd Street later tried to be. It was jumping with after-hours spots, regular hour joints, restaurants, cafes, a dozen to a block. Wow, that must have been some vibrant scene. This is looks like 133rd and 7th Avenue, Savoy Ballroom, Cab Calloway at the Cotton Club, Lenox, and all of these different maps and spots. This is an amazing thing. You can find it online, a better copy than this, the Harlem nightclub map, the reefer man on the corner selling marijuana. It's just a beautiful, beautiful document. So I have to say that this place is like a sacred place to me, because this was a residence of the great Sidney Bechet in 1941. Bechet was doing his RCA Victor recordings, the legendary recordings. And there was even an article, I think in Downbeat magazine, was saying, oh yeah, well, Bechet doesn't have a telephone, so he would just go to some club or a union hall and just find musicians the night before and put together his band. So every band was different, but it's incredible the variety of personnel on those RCA Victor, the early 40s, 1940 and 1941. And I just loved this place. The door has the most, the number 421 is carved on the door. We're just off of St. Nicholas Avenue here. Just a gorgeous place. And I could imagine Sidney Bechet living in one of these rooms and doing his thing back then in the early 40s. Here it is, 445 West 153rd Street, where Coleman Hawkins lived in 1960, and presumably quite a bit before that. I could see the young Sonny Rollins sitting here waiting for the maestro to come home. We're imagining all the people coming over to Coleman Hawkins' house after their gigs. Apparently he had these great soirees and people would sit and listen to music. Casals playing the Bach cello suites, and they would talk about music and chill out and eat and drink and have a good time. And wow, that must have been something. That gives me serious envy that I was not able to attend one of those soirees. So I've had this book ever since I was a little kid. Listening to music, I heard recordings of Sidney Bechet when I was 11 years old, and that made me decide to go into music. From there, I started to read books like this and read about people and read biographies. And I started to listen to more and more music. And Bechet led me to Charlie Parker, because there were like concerts where they were together on the same bill in Paris. There's a photograph of Bechet and the Charlie Parker biography, and so you start to cross-reference, and then Charlie Parker led me to Coltrane and Coleman Hawkins and Duke Ellington, and so this became like reading about these great musicians as a fan, but also listening and studying. And actually, I'd have to say that listening to all the great jazz musicians is the cornerstone and the basis for my style. So when I started to get into klezmer, I didn't want to make like some kind of a artificial hybrid, like smush jazz and klezmer together. I wanted to play a sort of original klezmer music that was informed by my whole relationship with jazz, and mostly in terms of attack and timbre and a certain kind of a swing. Listening to their music has really created a whole vocabulary for me. And again, it's not just saying like, oh, you copy this lick or you do that. It's a more subtle and a more kind of mysterious process of just that sound entering in, and that becomes part of the stew that I created for myself.